All right, saints, we're going to continue on with these revelations in the book of Revelation. And we're going to go now into chapter 14. The book of Revelation, chapter 14. And chapter 14 is the great harvest, the end times harvest of the earth. And in Revelation chapter 14:1, it starts with, and I looked. So John looks and he sees something. I looked and behold, the Lamb, that freshly slain Lamb that had raised up. In chapter 5, John sees that Lamb. I looked and behold, the Lamb was standing on Mount Zion. So now this Lamb, John looks and behold the Lamb, that freshly slain Lamb that rose up and took that scroll from the Father's hand. I looked and behold the Lamb was standing on Mount Zion. And Mount Zion represents the dwelling place of God. That's what Mount Zion represents. God the Father. What we have here, saints, we're going to see. You got to get this picture. This Lamb is now, this freshly slain Lamb that had rose up. He is now standing on Mount Zion, in that dwelling place of God the Father. Where is he? See this, saints? See this revelation. He's at his Father's house, that dwelling place of Almighty God, God the Father. And I looked and behold, the Lamb was standing on Mount Zion. He's at his Father's house, the dwelling place of his Father. And look at, because we're now going into the harvesting of the earth in the end times. And I looked and behold, the Lamb was standing on Mount Zion, and with him, with the Lamb, at his Father's house, 144,000. Now, so many try to tell you that this is the 144,000 Jews from Revelation chapter 7, 1 through 8. But as we've seen in previous messages, that's not 144,000 individual Jews in Revelation chapter 7, 1 through 8. We've seen that before. It's a representative number. It's the same thing, the same word that's represented in Matthew 14:21, Mark 6:44, Luke 9:14, and especially John 6:10, where the Lord is feeding the multitudes. And what does it say? It's always giving you an approximate number. A representative number truly is what it is. Because it'll say of about 5,000 men. And John put it this way, and the men sat down in number. That's the same word for number where you see in Revelation 7, verse 4, speaking about these Jews, and I heard the number of those who were sealed. It's the same word for number. And in all these, where the Lord, in the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, where the Lord's feeding the multitudes, it's always a representative number, this 5,000. It's a representative number. And as John put it, and the men sat down in number, the same word in Revelation 7, verse 4, and the men sat down in number about 5,000. So it's not an exact number. And it's not numbering the multitude. It's a representative number. It represented the whole, but it was about 5,000 men. It was not exactly 5,000 men, and it didn't represent the whole. It was just a representative number. So in Revelation chapter 7, we have this 144,000 that are sealed. These are sealed by God as the tribulation starting. Those Jews that are going to come to the Lord from every tribe of Israel, from the 12 tribes of Israel. So this 144,000, 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes is a representative number. It's not 144,000 in anything. It represents the whole. It's a number of about. That's what you see in Revelation chapter 7. And now everybody thinks this is the same ones. Revelation chapter 14, and I looked and behold the Lamb was standing on Mount Zion at his Father's house, the dwelling place of God, and with him 144,000. Because this is the representative number. We're going to see exactly, as we move on here just a little bit, we're going to see these aren't Jews. These can't be Jews. I don't know why people confuse that. This is 144,000. That number that represents the whole. It's not going to be 144,000. That 144,000 is now the representative number of the whole when speaking on a subject in the book of Revelation. So this 144,000 is not an exact number. It represents the whole, and as we move on here just a little bit, we're going to see they're not Jews. There will be some Jews in there, I'm sure, but they're not Jews, and we're going to see that very clearly. And so now we go on, and with him 144,000 having his name and the name of his Father written on their foreheads. Now, where did we see this in the book of Revelation? We don't have to be confused and have these weird stories of those that are on the broad road to destruction. It's all so clear if God opens your ears and opens your eyes. So this 144,000 are with the Lamb at his Father's house before the harvest, the large, is to come. We're going to see that very clearly. And these 144,000 having his name, the name of the Lord, and the name of his Father written on their foreheads. Where did we see this? Revelation chapter 3, verse 12. This is the message to the church of Philadelphia. As we've seen in previous messages, Philadelphia represents those that will be caught up in the pre-tribulation rapture. This is the first fruits church. He had not one bad thing to say about them, and he said he was going to keep them from that hour of temptation. Then after Philadelphia is taken in the pre-tribulation rapture, those he has not one bad thing to say about them. The last church, Laodicea, he has not one good thing to say about them. They're the ones that are not dressed, not ready. They're blind, they're naked. And he tells them to get dressed, to get ready. Those are the ones that go into the tribulation and get saved during the tribulation. So Revelation chapter 3 verse 12, in the message to the church of Philadelphia, the pre-tribulation rapture church, the first fruits church, look what he says here. Revelation chapter 3 verse 12. He who overcomes, speaking to those that are going to be caught up in the pre-tribulation rapture, speaking to those first fruits, speaking to those that he had not one thing to say bad about. He says, to he who overcomes, you that keep on, that don't give up, he who overcomes, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God, and he will not go out of it anymore. These will go in a structural, strong way into his temple, and they won't leave it anymore. But look at here, next. And I will write upon him the name of my God. Who's his God? The Father which is in heaven. Listen here, saints, it's so plain, it's so clear. I don't know why they don't see it, and I hope many of you do. And he will not go out from it anymore. And I will write upon him the name of my God, and the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem, which comes down from heaven, which comes down out of heaven from my God, and my new name. He said right here to the first fruits, to those he had not one bad thing to say about, to those he said he would keep from that hour of testing. He said these two things about this to him. And I will write upon him the name of my God. I will write upon him the name of my Father and my new name. When we come to this 144,000 in Revelation chapter 14, leading up to the harvest, what do we see here? What did he say about them? And I looked, and behold, the Lamb was standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, a representative number, not the number, it represents the whole. 144,000 having his name and the name of his Father written on their foreheads. What did he say there to the church of Philadelphia? And I will write upon him the name of my God, my Father's name, and my new name. That is these. This is the pre-tribulation rapture, saints. This is the first fruits of the harvest to come. It's so obvious, and we're going to see these can't be Jews. Let's go on with this now. The Lamb's now standing at his Father's house. He has this representative number, this people here. It's not an exact number. It represents the whole, 144,000, and they have his name and the name of his Father written on their foreheads. The same thing he said to the church of Philadelphia that he was going to do, and as we've seen in many messages, that's the pre-tribulation rapture church. That's the first fruits church. So we now have this Lamb standing at his Father's house. He has these first fruits, Philadelphia, with him. And you know it's them because they have his name and the name of his Father written on his forehead. Verse 2, and I heard a voice. Listen to that, saints. I heard a voice, not voices. I heard a voice from heaven, like the sound of many waters, and like the sound of loud thunder. The voice which I heard, again, the voice, singular. The voice which I heard was like the sound of harpists, plural, playing on their harps. So you have this one voice. It's like the sound of many waters. And the voice which I heard was like the sound of harpists, plural. The voice is always singular, but it's plural, harpists, many waters. What do we have here, saints? And look at verse 3. And they, now it's plural. It was singular, a voice. The sound of this is all singular, but now, and they, plural, sang a new song before the throne and before the four living creatures and the elders. And no one could learn the song except the 144,000 who had been purchased from the earth. So why do we have this a voice that sounds like many waters and like the sound of thunder? And the voice, singular again, which I heard was like the sound of harpists, plural, playing on their harps. And now again, and they, plural, sang a new song. It's the same thing you saw in Acts. Acts chapter 2, verses 1 through 4, on the day of Pentecost. And when the day of Pentecost had come, they were all together in one place. Or as the King James puts it a little clearer, they were all in one accord in one place. Here you have this 144,000. They're all in one place with the Lamb on Mount Zion at his Father's house. And they're in one accord. There's a voice and the voice, but it's they sang. It's the same thing as the day of Pentecost. And when the day of Pentecost had come, they were all together in one place, or as the King James says, they were all in one accord. It's one voice. These people are all at the same place, the same cross. They're at the cross. They've come to the cross in that resurrection life. They've given up this life. They're all in one accord. It's not Baptists and Methodists and Southern and Pentecostals and Catholics. No, these people have come to the cross. They've come out of religion. They've come out of division. And they've been caught up to the Father's house with the Lamb in Mount Zion, this representative number. And they're there with this one voice. And now, look what it said there then. And no one could learn the song except for the 144,000. This pre-tribulation rapture, this is the Father having this feast for his Son, as his Son waits for the bride, Laodicea, to prepare herself. And they're at the Father's house. And no one could learn the song except for these 144,000. Why? Because this is a one-time thing, saints. God's calling a people to come to the wedding feast, which is before the marriage supper, to the Father's house, to have a feast with his Son while the bride prepares herself. And this 144,000's there, and that's why no one can learn the song except for them. The pre-tribulation rapture is not going to be those risen from the grave, because as we saw in a previous message, Paul said the end can't come. The coming of the Lord won't happen. We won't gather together with him as a whole, as a church, until after the antichrist is revealed. We saw that in the previous message here. So the pre-tribulation rapture is for those that are ready, waiting, and watching, those that are alive. Christ was the first fruits of the dead. As it said in 1 Corinthians 15, starting in verse 20. But now Christ has been raised from the dead, the first fruits of those who are asleep. Christ was the first fruits of the dead. We're going to have the first fruits of the living in the pre-tribulation rapture. And that doesn't include the ones that have died. That's why it says here, and no one can learn the song except for this 144,000. This pre-tribulation rapture is for those that are ready, waiting, and watching. The dead are not going to rise yet. That comes, as we've seen in many messages, and we'll see again, that comes later. This is for those that are ready, waiting, and watching. They're not those where they were called, oh, I got to bury my father, I just took a wife, I'm starting a business, I bought a farm. All these things that people are doing. I started a company, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Everything, buddy's busy. The Lord's calling many people, but few are listening, few are paying attention, few are getting ready. But the ones that do, as I said in Philadelphia, to the overcomers, those that he said not one bad thing about, and those that he said he would keep from that hour of temptation. That's this 144,000. The pre-tribulation rapture, the first fruits, those going to the wedding feast, is for those that are alive. It's the first fruits of the living. Christ was the first fruits of the dead. The pre-tribulation rapture, those going to the wedding feast, it's the first fruits of the living. The living. This pre-tribulation rapture has nothing to do with the dead. That will come later. We've seen that before, and we'll see that again. And let's go on and see these things even clearer play out that I've told you. That these can't be Jews. There may be some Jews in there, but this is not talking about the 144,000 Jews. Let's go now to chapter 4, because he's going to explain to you who these people are. Chapter 4 says, these are the ones, this 144,000, these are the ones who have not been defiled with women, for they have kept themselves chaste. Yes, certainly it means they're not out committing adultery. They're not out having sex with everybody. They're not out fooling around. Of course it means that. But what it mainly means is these are the ones who have not been defiled with women. They have kept themselves chaste. They're not out there fooling around with the world and the things of the world. They're committed to the Lord. They're his bride. They're virgins to him. They've repented and prepared the way of the Lord. Their life is wholly given to him. That's what this is talking about. Because look at what Paul said too in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 2. 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 2. Look what Paul said here. For I am jealous for you with a godly jealousy. For I betrothed you to one husband. They have kept themselves chaste. I betrothed you to one husband, that to Christ I might present you as a pure virgin. That's God's purpose when you get born again, or as you've been a Christian and you've gotten away, that you repent and prepare the way of the Lord, and you come back to him and holy him. You're that pure virgin, waiting for your husband, waiting for the Lamb. You're chaste. You're not out in the world. You're not out in sin. You're not out in flesh. You're waiting for his return. You're waiting for that thief in the night. And now go on. These are the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. What did we see? Who did we see with this? These are the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. Genesis 5:22 through 24. Genesis 5:22 through verse 24. Then Enoch walked with God 300 years after he became the father of Methuselah, and he had other sons and daughters. So all the days of Enoch were 365 years. And listen, saints, after he's had these sons and these daughters and he's went on in life, and Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. These are the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. Where else did we see that? Genesis 6:8 and 9. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. These are the records of the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, like Philadelphia, blameless. He had not one bad thing to say to him, to Philadelphia. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his time. Why? Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord, and he repented, and he followed the word of God. Noah was a righteous man. He found grace in the eyes of the Lord, blameless in his time. Noah walked with God. And here, these are the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. Enoch walked with God, and then he was not, for God took him. This is 144,000 that you're seeing in these people. These have been purchased from amongst men as first fruits to God and to the Lamb. He's standing on Mount Zion. The Lamb is at his Father's house. These have been purchased from among men as first fruits to God and the Lamb. These have been purchased from amongst men. The King James puts it, from mankind. The King James says these have been purchased from mankind. The New American Standard says from amongst men, not the Jews. This is not the Jews. Mankind is man of around the earth. All nations, tongues, tribes, and people. Yes, this is the first fruits, and there will be some Jews that are ready for the pre-tribulation rapture. But this is talking about mankind. This 144,000, it doesn't name Jews. It doesn't name the 12 tribes of Israel. In fact, it takes it just the opposite. These have been purchased from mankind, from people around the world. And verse 5, and no lie was found in their mouth. They're blameless, just like Noah. They're blameless. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his time. Why? Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord, and Noah walked with God. This 144,000 is the first fruits of it's Philadelphia. Those he had not one bad thing to say about. And they're at his Father's house in Mount Zion. And they are those first fruits of the harvest to come. Not the harvest, not the Jews. They're the first fruits presented to God of the harvest at large to come.